And he didn't do it. He didn't do it. I thought we were gonna be 3 for 3. I thought we were
Nah.
gonna be 3 for 3, but almost there, man. Almost, my man. How you doing, man?
I went, "Mwah," and then I realized I was on mute. I'm good, brother. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like it feels like Monday today. So it's one of those days, brother.
Yeah. It does feel like a Monday today, doesn't it? It's weird.
It
That's
does.
interesting. But today we got some pretty cool videos, and we got the fortune map, which is follow up. And all this week, Ryan, we've been pounding that beast that is follow up, and no beasts were hurt in the making of this podcast. And we've you like that, eh? I think it's a good thing that we pounded it for the week, because hopefully y'all have really really taken a different approach to follow up. On Tuesday, data day yesterday, we had a little talk about follow up, more about the market conditions and the importance of following up with data to continue that education. So follow up is not just to your prospect. I mean, it's with everything, right? It's that continuing education map, that following up with that data and that piece of data that you had. How do you follow up with that next week? And Ryan, on Tuesday, we gave our strategies, our personal strategies in follow up and some techniques. And Monday, we talked about follow up as a whole. So today, it's kind of that roadmap and touching on the back end of follow up and why following up in different methods is so important. Do you have anything you want to go before we jump into that first video?
No, that was great. That was a great introduction for keeping to this theme essentially. Instead of like having like different topics, for everybody who's out there and going through that. We're going into Q4 right now, and some people might be starting brand new, going into a new role. And some people say like Q4 is going to be up. Some people say Q4 is going to be down. But at the end of the day, the one thing we can control is doing our follow ups, right? So I'm interested to see the videos today and how we can relate it back to what we did today.
All right, well, let's do it. We'll start with follow up 1.
Let's say that you have a lead, you had a sales call with them, or multiple calls if you sell B2B. They just, ended up missing the next appointment. And now a month or two later, you're calling them back following up. I notice a lot of salespeople, and people even do it to us when they email us like, hey, I'm just following up, or I'm just checking in. The way a prospect interprets you saying I'm just following up, or I'm just calling to check in, all that means is, hey, I'm just calling to try to sell you something so I can make money. That's how most prospects interpret those words. So you want to stay away from the following up or checking in words, because it triggers resistance, because they are used to every single salesperson who's ever tried to sell them anything, call them saying, I'm following up or I'm checking in, or emailing them the same thing. So you start to position yourself like everybody else that they're trying to get rid of.
I love this guy. I keep seeing this guy's ads. Like he keeps, I forget his name, but like he's great. He's awesome. And Dan, what he said there, it made me think of another phrase that some people use is touching base. And I hate that word so much. I hate that phrase because it's like, what is touching base? Like, are you a baseball player, or like what's base? First of all, like you're not hitting home runs. And the last thing we want to do, we've kind of stressed this, is like, you don't want to sound like a sales rep, and you don't want to sound like somebody who's like the 15th broker who called them for the day. And, there's two things. Dan, you mentioned this, I believe, on the Monday's episode. We're sticking true to your word, right? So it's just like, if they've missed an appointment, why are you following up a month or two later? Right? If they missed a call, like some people take it personal. And that's the one thing I get from this, Dan, is like, prospecting and following up it's not personal, man. It really isn't, man. If they miss it, life happens, right? So understand that. Go in there with an understanding. We talk about this tomorrow, which is like power of the now. Live in the now, right? So don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. Focus on what you can control now, because that's truly what's important.
Yeah. One of the big things I've seen with people myself in follow up when I first started is I really did take it personally when the person canceled, and I got pissed off when they canceled at the last minute. However, there's one thing that we need to understand when we're following up, right? There's priorities in everyone's day. And, you've probably noticed it just as I have. As you get busier and as things change, priorities change. And it doesn't mean that you're insignificant as a freight provider. But what if your prospect had one of their main ingredients go down, and their managers now task them with finding a new supplier, right? Now, they have to find a new supplier for ingredients so they could make their move and create their product, right? Do you really think at that point that bringing another logistics provider on, again, we go back to a conversation we had last week, I believe it was, where it takes more time, energy, and effort out of the logistics manager's day to bring you on. Do we really think that all of a sudden it's like we get angry, frustrated, pissed off, and not necessarily like to the prospect, but how many times have you hung up the phone and went, you know what I mean? And it's just a fact that their priorities have changed.
Yeah.
But that's why the fortune is in the follow-up, because their priorities might have changed for the next 2 weeks. But if you consistently follow up and know that you're going to be there when that changes, there's a big difference in the overall benefit, success of your sequences, of your pipeline, and of your sales campaigns.
I couldn't agree more with that, Dan. I love that so much. And as we're doing these episodes, it had me thinking one night, I think it was Tuesday night, when before I went to sleep, I was like, you know, what are we really looking forward in terms of like follow up? You know, what am I truly, like we said, try to book that meeting, which I said on the previous days. But, you know, I want to understand what they're kind of going through as a person. Like you mentioned ingredients. One of the things I look at, if you're in the automotive space, they're very volatile in terms of that, hey, if they don't have enough parts, lines could shut down and like money is like, you know, it's crazy. Like the amount of money that they do like in Sprinter vans, like just to ship maybe like a little letter or a little box or something like that, just for that. Even when I worked in event logistics, you know, that one truck that might have picked up an hour late, well, you've got 40 union workers waiting for that one truck, all getting paid like $30 an hour. So when you hold that line, you have to understand what it kind of looks at from there. And, you know, when I look at that video and just what you're kind of saying on my end here is that be somebody of value and control that value too. Right. And I think with this gentleman, what he kind of said was that, you know, I don't want to just touch base. I don't want to be another guy. I want to be the person who you basically call when things go down. When ingredients go down, you're going to call me. You know, I'm going to be your right hand and be the extension of supply chain, because let's be honest, we've always said this, you know, you have something that somebody wants out there. So it's up to you to kind of go and seek that. And I just feel like the fortune or the abundance of life and everything like that favors those who takes those chances, those who actually make things happen rather than the ones who sit and make it happen. You know, the ones who sit and like, hey, maybe I wonder if I can win the lottery. It's just like, no, I'm going to win. I'm going to go after it every single day.
Yeah. And, you know, and it's interesting because what he said in that video was, you know, don't say I'm following up.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I'm touching base. Because I think that is a lazy man's follow-up, right? And man, woman, doesn't matter. It's just a lazy person's follow-up. Have a mission for your follow-up. Like I've always, when I follow up, my emails kind of start with, you know, love this part of our conversation last time, been thinking about it a lot. Oh, by the way, you know, we said we touch base in 2 days. So I'm touching base to see what our next steps are. I always reference part of the original conversation or part of my original email. As opposed to saying, hey, following up. Now, I will sometimes put in the subject line, you know, my original subject line - follow-up.
Yeah.
I will sometimes do that. And, you know, now watching this video, I'm thinking maybe that's why some of these emails aren't getting the open rate, because I'm using that word follow-up. And so I'm going to try and switch that out, actually. Just realizing watching that video actually is changing my perspective. And try it. Like, it don't cost you nothing to try it. It really doesn't. It really doesn't, because most of the time, if the person's going to say no, they're going to say no regardless of the way you start the call, right? Like it's call a spade a spade. If you have a tool, a service that they need, you got to be like a snake oil person for them not to want to use you, right? At least have a conversation with you if you possibly have a solution to their challenge.
And everybody's going to learn from somebody. And it brings up something that I was just looking up here. I've mentioned that I really like Ryan Serhant. He has a book, Big Money Energy and Sell It Like Serhant. He's a real estate agent. So there's some parallels that we can take, because like if you work in real estate, it really is a transactional sale. Like it's a one-time sale. Maybe you'll get that follow-up, but you really have to always go. And he has 3 F's in terms of like, he calls it follow up, follow through, and follow back. So he says within the follow-up, he says his number one tip is like, never expect people to get in touch with you. It is your job to get a hold of them. And Ryan often says that, follow up until they buy or they die, which obviously is pretty cool from there. And then he talks about like follow through. When you say you're going to do something, do it. Period.
Yes.
End of story. Create accountability for yourself if you need to do it, but never forget that you don't just have clients, you have relationships. And I think that's so important. And it comes back like to the last part, which is like follow back. It's like, keep in touch with your past clients. Remember that relationships don't end at closing. Stay on top of mind by touching base, by saying hello every once in a while. Well, I feel like that can be a little bit different because like we have that relationship based in sales. But, always kind of like talk to people, like clients that you've possibly lost. Don't feel like, like they'll come back crawling to me, because it goes back to the number one thing that he says. It's like, never expect people to get in touch with you. It is your job to get a hold of them. And I just think that there's just so much power to that. I think
100%.
It's just amazing.
I've had customers that is using me for truckload on a specific lane. And then I'll be having a conversation with them one day and they're like, yeah, we're doing this bunch of LTL. I'm like, well, do you want me to, you do LTL? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I do. We talked about that in one of our first calls. And it's like, okay, I didn't follow up on the LTL portion of the business, or the air, international, ocean, whatever, like rail, warehousing, P&D, distribution, none of that, because it's like all of a sudden you get the truckload or you get some LTL business and you're just so laser focused on that. The follow-up doesn't stop when prospects become clients. It actually just starts again on a different level. What are you trying to elevate? We talked about customer value journey a few weeks ago. How are you looking to elevate your customer through the value journey? That takes follow-up. That takes completion of tasks. That takes completion of, testing you out on things and you coming through doing those, 3 things that you say you do really well in your original follow-up. Now you got to follow through on those follow-ups, and then you follow back and say, we originally talked about truckload, we got the truckload, can we talk about your LTL? And so that's how we can take those 3 F's and convert them into logistics, Ryan. Right?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And Dan, you bring up a great point here. I love that you said that, because I had a personal story with that, with customs brokerage, right? Like we noticed that a customer, we were always using a 3-letter word, customs brokerage, who didn't make them a priority. And we always had delays, and we just mentioned to them, and they're like, "Oh, you guys do that?" And that furthered conversations going forward. So always, like I said, always assume that. The reason why I'm laughing right now, Dan, is in logistics, in sales, I've learned that you never ask 2 questions in one email. The reason is that you're always going to get one response. Or if you ask an A/B question, you'll either get a yes or a no. But it's just like, no, I asked you if you want pizza or lasagna, right? So always be assuming and always understanding that that you do have to kind of keep going over things and regurgitate as well till they get to a point where they're sitting in a meeting with their boss and their boss's boss, and they're like, oh my God, we had container shipments stuck, blah, 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 for X amount of days, and the demurrage and all that stuff. And it's just like, oh, yeah, Dan mentioned that a couple weeks ago on our call. I'll put my hand up and I'll call Dan after we get off this meeting, right? So just always make them aware of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan, it goes a little bit back to what we were saying about the front burner, back burner. Maybe when you're speaking to the client, on the front burner right now is truckload, and then in a month or 2 they're having challenges with LTL, but they don't remember you spoke about LTL because it was in passing on one of your intro calls, and the main purpose for them to continuing the conversation originally at that point was because you had truckload capabilities. Not because you had brokerage, not because you had ocean or rail or warehousing, but as your relationship progresses, so do the needs. And it might not, they might not have a need for anything but truckload for a year. But if you continue, I love that follow back idea, because if you continue to follow back and address the initials, then you keep that at the forefront of their mind. Because I think we as humans, just in general, forget. Like if somebody calls us up and said, I do air and ocean, I'm going to probably remember that person a little bit more than the truckload guy I use that says he has an air and ocean division once.
Just top of sight and top of mind. And I love that. I love that. Yeah, very, very informative for everybody who's watching out there. To take these strategies, because Dan and I are learning through this whole week. With Data Day being yesterday, and then having the webinar with Chris Bogue as well. So these are awesome strategies. Let's hop into the next video and see what we think about it.
Yeah.
Play it.
Am I playing it or are you playing it?
Yeah, you played it. I saw the
And your
mouse.
prospect don't answer your emails, that doesn't mean that they're not interested in your service or product. Maybe they're just busy doing something else, like driving or scrolling on TikTok. So that's why, in my opinion, you shouldn't be afraid to follow up with your prospects. Actually, we even say money is in the follow-up. Why? Because it can take up to 12 touches on different channels before they actually answer. So the only thing to keep in mind is to leave enough time in between each action or follow-up and bring value at every step of the way. And this is where most people screw up, because they only talk about themselves and send generic salesy messages.
Always talk about themselves and send generic salesy messages. Something that goes all the way back to Monday, doesn't it, Ryan?
I'm sensing a theme here, Dano. It's not us. It's a little bit validation as well for everything that we've kind of been saying on our end, and everything I agree with there. I love what resonated with me is that enough time frame, and I said on Tuesday that I leave those touches between every 2 days. Yeah. And I think it's just really important. Don't say you're going to follow up. I'm going to wait for the first of the month. I'm going to send that one email, that one call, and then reach out to them in a couple more months, or you just be like, I forgot. At the end of the day, you are in control of your own destiny. And one thing that you mentioned that I forgot to mention when you're talking was that, we get these follow-ups, we get them as customers, but you got to remember too, there's two things. Sometimes it might not be a fit for that prospect, but they might go to another company and you're going to be top of mind there. And then secondly, there's going to be situations where, they're going to need referrals, they're going to have other people, they all talk, they all part of traffic associations and things like that. And, you want to be that person, persistent. Every success story that I've heard about a sales rep telling me about a customer, it wasn't about a one call close. I've never heard a success story about that. I've heard that a prospect, I call them, hey, give me a shot. No, call me next week. They call next week. Give me a shot. No, call. And then one of them was like, okay, finally, I'll give you a shot, right? And then you give the shot and then you get your chance in, right? So you always got to continuously be persistent, being active. And I love that he kind of puts everything that we talked about this entire week into a 40-second clip.
Yeah. And you know what? And one thing here is, which is another reason why I love email so much, is because I continue the story, right? Every email has a story and I continue the story. And I believe part of follow-up is showing them that attractive character that you are, and showing them with each call, with each voicemail, with each email, the value that you bring to the table. And I also believe in every one of those emails, I always, again, I know we're repeating ourselves, but this is critical, is I always ask if this is of interest. If it's not, please email me back. Simply hit reply and hit no, not of interest, and I'll never bother you again. Because I do believe, Bob Berg taught me this. He said, Dan always gives somebody an out. And some salespeople might not agree with it. I love giving people an out because I don't want them to be uncomfortable. He mentioned in the video, he says, that time period between me, it's every 2 days. And why is it every 2 days? Because I don't want them to forget the story I'm trying to paint the picture in their head with. Yeah. And by doing that, I find they get to know me during the follow-up process. So in the end, when we do book an appointment, when we do have a meeting, when we do schedule a demo or something, we can always be there. And we're both at the same starting point because we've had the conversations. Yesterday, your webinar was so remarkable, brother. And we officially launched the 30-day free trial to Bridger. And we're so excited because every single one of these techniques that we've given you this week is in Bridger, pre-built. That literally the system does it for you. You want to do a phone sequence, does it for you. You want to do an email sequence, does it for you. You want to do a DM sequence, does it for you. You want to do a video message sequence. Hell, we got Bridger, we got SendSpark in there with Bridger that you saw yesterday on the webinar. It does it for you. it literally creates that fortune map in the follow-up, like we're talking about today. And for me, Ryan, that's critical. That's critical in my business. You know, we talk about not consuming calories to think, to get things done. You know, there's reasons some of the most successful people on the planet wear the same thing almost every day because they don't even want to think about what they wear, right? Like, keep all your calories for what matters and what moves the needle. And what moves the needle in your day-to-day? Your follow-up. So how can you use 0 calories to figure out who to follow up? Well, you get Bridger and you just simply click on today's to-dos and there's all of your follow-up. And for me, that I think is a key point for a lot of salespeople, because if they're screwing around with a bulky system, not realizing who they got to follow up, did they miss anyone yesterday and all that, by the time they go through all of those actions, that follow-up bug to say, I got to follow up today is actually diminished.
Yeah.
And I think that's where procrastination sets in. Oh, I'll go get another cup of coffee and then I'll finish this reporting to figure out who I got to follow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you'll put it later. And, you know, shout out to everybody who came on yesterday and, you know, with that big launch of that big announcement. You know, Dan, I want to share a quick story about a good friend of mine who's in the financial sector. And we had a great conversation. We sat down and he was talking about his goals and things like that. And he told me, you know, when I hit a certain, I asked him what his dreams were. And he told me that he wants this ring that they give you when you hit a certain milestone. So we sat down and we broke it down. And I was like, okay, what's going to take you to get there? And we kind of figured out the number is going to be, he has to see 5 people every day and he'll close like 2 of them. Right. And that's kind of gets him the ring. But even now I told him too, I was like, every time I see him, I kind of make that, you know, we went to go shoot pool last week. And, you know, he said like, you know, Ryan, you kind of changed my life in this point, because I never saw it like that. Right. I never been like so focused. And I want everybody out there to understand that, find your thing that you're working towards, because I hate when people say, you know, like, we are here to make commission. You know, we are here to make sales. That's what we don't do this for free. We're not a nonprofit, but there's something that you're working towards. Like for me, I'm working towards like the dog rescue and things like that. Find out a mission that works, even if it's as simple as getting like a brand new car. You know, figure what that is and then make that everything. Plaster it all over your walls, you know, plaster it over, live and breathe that. So when you look at that and you're like, yeah, I really got to make my follow-ups, you know, because that's a pattern interrupt. I talk about pattern interrupts as well this week. But when I look at that, I'm like, okay, well, I know that I need to make these prospecting touches because I'm not going to get that car that I want. I'm not going to get that watch I want. I'm not going to be able to go on that vacation. I'm not going to be able to retire my parents. I'm not going to be able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them. Right. I'm just going to be under that ball and chain. So I think it's just really important when you kind of get into that mindset. And that's what Dan was talking about, that customer value journey a couple of weeks ago. Your customer they have a goal in mind. You know, they sit down every beginning of the year or even now as they're looking at for next year's outlooks. Okay, we got to reduce supply chain by X, or we got to do this. Dan, you shared so many times on this story, on this show about like your one customer who was able to go get that pool. You know, so sell that feeling, you know, and I just think, you know, this is why you do the follow-ups, right? Everyone says find the why, but this is the why. This is really the why you keep on doing the follow-ups.
You know, there's another thing to add to that, because I love that you said, you know, you get that goal, a new car, for example, and you say, you know, I have to do these follow-ups to get the new car. Once you get the new car, then when you plan your next goal, so say that's, you know, a really expensive, like luxury trip. I can't wait to do the follow-ups to get to that trip. So it goes from I have to I can't wait to. And when you find when your perspective shifts from I have to I can't wait to, that's when your entire life changes. Or I get to, yes, that's when your entire life changes, because that's when your follow-up becomes part of your overall sales strategy that will never be missed. When I have to do something, it's like, I know I have to make sales calls. I know I have to make follow-ups. I know I have to do the prospecting. But how many of you out there, be honest with yourself, how many of you out there know you have to do it, but you still don't do it 5 days a week, right? Maybe you don't even do it 3 days a week. Maybe some weeks you don't even do it, right? I knew my entire business career that I had to do cold calls. But I'll tell you, when I was doing, you know, 130, 140, 150, 160 in GP a month, those cold calls were few and far between, because I'm like, oh, no, I know I have to do it, but I'm doing pretty well right now. And I, you know, regrets, I don't have any regrets. I do wish I had this philosophy on follow-up while I was doing that, because I would have hit 6, 7, 8, 900,000 in GP. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's the difference, people, is what your follow-ups will always be to the matter of the desires you have in life. And like Ryan said, you create those new beliefs, like the things you want, whether material, non-material, doesn't matter. Like, you know, Ryan already said it. Maybe it's something 10 years down the road, we're saying, I want to be in a position to do this. And that why will always be stronger than the procrastination to follow up. And the bigger and better thing that I truly suggest all of you, after watching like 4 full days about follow up now, figure out whatever it is you need for follow up to become the major habit, where when you don't do it, you don't feel right.
Yeah.
You know, like almost like on when you were going to school and you didn't do your homework and you knew that that project was due on the Monday, that feeling you had in your gut on Sunday night, like that is the feeling I'd really like all of you to get every day when you don't do follow-ups. Like, man, I really let somebody down. And this is one of the biggest things why I say to myself every day, who needs me on my A game today? Because my A game consists of follow-up, consists of prospecting, consists of making myself better every single day to achieve the goal. And if I don't ask myself who needs me in my A game, at the end of the day, if I do nothing, I don't really have that feeling. But at the end of the day, when I ask myself who needs me in my A game and I don't do anything, I'll tell you that feeling of disgust, the feeling like I've let somebody down is real, Ryan. Real.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how many times we can let ourselves down and we'll just kind of like clock that away to like, oh, well, it is what it is, right? But the worst feeling is like letting somebody else down. Like I mentioned on Monday, like when I was sick, like that past weekend, you know, I felt like I let down, like I had commitments and I let down. I was more upset about letting those people down than me actually being sick and in bed and things like that. And, you know, for everyone who's watching out there, Dan, you bring up some amazing points for everybody to keep going, you know, keep focusing on it, because when it comes to follow-ups, you know, you're getting closer to your goals, whether it be mindset, whatever you really, really want. And, you know, set yourself up, you know, because you have to do it, you know, don't feel like, even if you've got to ignore all the LinkedIn gurus and all that stuff that say this, that, because everyone's going to have an opinion, but understand what works for you and just do the work. It's that
opinions
simple.
are like assholes, right, buddy? Everyone's got one. So
there we go.
You know, and not to get canceled, but this is why, Ryan, on Monday, when you said, Dan, like, what are your top couple of things that you talk about follow-up? Follow-up needs to be enjoyable. Like there's just, and I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to say it. Find what you like to do and follow up in that manner, right? Like if you enjoy turning on your phone and doing videos, then take your phone, get on LinkedIn, every single one of your prospects, connect with them on LinkedIn and send them a video message from your phone, or turn on your camera and send them a video message, or turn on SendSpark in your Bridger system and send them a video message. If that's what you like to do, then do that. And every time, try and get better, maybe smoother in your transitioning from the request, from the hook, story, and offer. Maybe it's, you know, changing up the format. Maybe it's whatever. Like, keep testing to make it interesting. You know, because Ryan, I'm sure you're of the same style. Is if something's repetitive and doesn't create that, like doesn't spark the creative juices, you get bored of it. Right. I have a buddy of mine who does printing cards, and I was just at his place yesterday, and I was at his place on Monday, and he had said, we were talking about this huge order. He had 13,000 decks of cards to do for a bank. Yeah. And he said, Dan, you know what? After 4,000 decks, I got so bored of seeing the same deck of cards. He goes, so what I have to do is I have to put in a different deck of cards. So he just sees different images because he goes blind to those images. Like he goes, I started to put like duplicates because he goes, I just go blind to it. And he says, I have to change it up. So his follow-up to get those done, he's actually changing the process in which he does it in order to keep him excited about like the images and all that kind of stuff. So I think as humans, we need to do that all the time. It's just like any relationship. You get bored in the relationship, you start to split up. If you get bored in your follow-up, you start to split up with it. And that splitting up with it is costing you your future. It truly is. And if I don't know if I can say it any more clear for everyone out there, figure out your follow-up as to what makes you excited and go with it, and then gamify that to do even more and get creative. Because as you get creative and things start clicking, you're going to be more excited to do more follow-up. And it's this beautiful circle, right? Competence, confidence, loop circle, which just builds that motivation.
There we go. I feel like there's no better way to wrap that up with that final thought there. So, we got tomorrow, want to thank everybody for joining us like Monday through Thursday for basically our series on follow-up. And if you did find value in this, like, let us know. If there's certain topics you guys want us to talk about, let us know. Like I said, on Monday, I'm really interested to get into like strategies for introverts, because I think that's going to be such an amazing, groundbreaking episode as well. But, tomorrow we'll be hitting back our book club Fridays. I think we're going into chapter 8, I think it is. Yeah, chapter 8 of The Power of Now. So shout out to everybody for joining us, for letting us share our message and sharing, taking the time out of your day to spend with you. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.